Very much, Phil. Now, the use of emoticons in messages could cause potential financial damage and unwanted contracts to users. This is basically the warning from legal advisors. Placing emoticons such as a thumbs up, a smiley face, bottles of champagnes, you know, those dancing figures, the sunshine, other emoticons of a celebratory impression, when negotiating a contract might result in the legal obligation. Johannes du Plessis, a legal advisor at Risk Benefit Solutions, joins us now to talk about this. I'm confused, Johannes. I hope you're going to help me figure what's going on here. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, so let's talk about emoticons. So, according to Section 22 of the Electronic Communications Act, it basically provides that contracts concluded wholly or partly by a data message is valid in law. Elaborate a little bit on this for us.
Yeah, including seemingly innocent emoticons and emojis in SMSs, instant messages and emails can potentially lead to you becoming liable in terms of a contract and for damages in terms of that contract. So what persons need to realize is that the formula for a contract is very simple, and it's only an offer and acceptance equals a contract. So many people negotiate lease agreements with landlords and agents on instant messaging, and also sale and purchase agreements through instant messages for sellers, which they found on website classifieds and in the newspapers as well. And it is this acceptance element that can be very widely interpreted. If you just create the impression of positivity, acceptance or agreement in the mind of the person who had made the offer, then the contract can be deemed to be concluded, and the person who had made the offer can actually stop you from relying on the true nature of the emoticon, and he can say that because you created this impression of positivity in my mind, the contract is then deemed to be concluded.
Wow. All right, so let's put this in layman's terms now. Say I'm negotiating something with you. I want to buy something that you own. We're busy discussing this over WhatsApp, and we put the offer through, and the response is not a yes or a no, but a response from you to me who is wanting to buy something from you, is two glasses of champagne clinging, which is congratulations, well done, that's great. So are you saying that that to me reads, well done, congratulations, the offer is through?
Yes, well, the law of contract should be interpreted and developed together with the new ways of messaging as well. So when you develop the principles of contract, you take into account these new methods of communication, then you also take into account these instant message emoticons and emojis, which then can be interpreted and used by message users as positivity. And these positivity messages can then be interpreted as a yes or a no. And this has actually been seen in cases where, for example, in one case, a landlord placed his property online. He was negotiating with a prospective tenant, and the prospective tenant placed a message of a thumbs up, dancing figures and a bottle of champagne on the instant message and sent it to the landlord. And the landlord actually perceived this message as being an acceptance. He took his property off of the website and he didn't receive rent for it. So the court eventually found this tenant, which never accepted the contract actually in his own mind, they found him liable for damages to the landlord in the form of loss of prospective rent.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, that's actually unbelievable if you think about it. But have these sort of acts and the law been modified? I mean, emoticons haven't been around for very long. Have we suddenly seen a bit of a change, or is this the beginning of the change where you've got to now add emoticons into the law and saying, listen, you send this, you're guilty, or you are now liable for this, and this is what it means?
I think this is the beginning of the change, because emoticons and emojis are now more increasingly being used by instant message users, and the court cases are beginning to take it into account. And legislation actually have been modified as well to start taking the data messages into account, whereby the data message is actually perceived or deemed to be received and accepted by the receiver as soon as it enters the PC or the phone of the receiver. So the contract is actually, in terms of legislation, deemed to be concluded as soon as it enters the phone and the computer of the receiver and the person who had made the offer.
So tell me now, surely with the use of emoticons, what happens if they are liable for a contract when they've used it in an innocent message? I mean, can this be used against you? Not necessarily in what we're referring to, the case that you gave us, that was for, you know, a rental of a property or the buying of a property. But if it is in the case of perhaps a relationship, a divorce in a relationship, I mean, if I had to, for instance, if I'm having a fight with somebody and I get very cross and I send the emoji with a knife, I mean, can that be held against me?
Yes, definitely. You can be held liable for hurt feelings and defamation in terms of emojis. And if you then create an impression of an obligation, then you can be bound by that obligation as well.
Do people realize this? Do we go out there and innocently communicate on WhatsApp, not actually realizing the implications of what we may think is something that's, it's fun, you send off a message, whatever. But actually some people can take you to task for that. Are people educated enough?
I think that people should be more educated with regards to the principles of contract and their risk of liability in terms of contract, because they very recklessly use these emoticons and these abbreviations of sentences that they use in instant messages these days. And they don't realize that these abbreviations and emoticons can be very easily interpreted and widely interpreted by the receivers of the message as something else as that it was intended for, and therefore then eventually being held liable for a contract or for damages.
Yeah. I mean, should we be communicating over WhatsApp, though? Shouldn't we be sort of, especially with very big contracts and things like that, to have it over WhatsApp? I mean, is that really the way to be doing business, or is it? Is that the future? Is that how we are seeing contracts being tied up these days?
That's actually where the movement is going to. So we've got a lot of businessmen actually moving towards instant message service providers and using instant messaging as a way of business communication. And on this instant messages, they can attach documents, they can use group chat messages and include various persons in one chat room and hold meetings like that. And it can be very effective for business. And I think it's a good way of conducting business as long as it's done clearly and effectively and not vaguely, which can be interpreted as something else that it was intended for.
All right. I definitely want to continue this conversation at a later stage, especially when it comes to group chats, messages, things like that, because I think we need to get a lot more about this. Johannes du Plessis, thanks very much for talking to us here on the program, discussing, he's from Risk Benefit Solutions, discussing the use of emoticons and how they can get you into trouble. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I really didn't. But if you negotiating with somebody, you're trying to do something, even if you're threatening somebody and you send them a picture of, say, I don't know, one of those little revolvers or knives, that can actually be held against you. And that is something you really need to keep in your mind when communicating. So you may think it's innocent, but you know what? You've got to be careful. These things can be held against you. All right, so there you go. We'll continue that conversation. I really do want to continue it and talk more about the laws that are surrounding these different world that we're living in when it comes to communicating via WhatsApp and any other form of social media, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is. All right. We've got time for one more interview here on the program, and I think possibly one of the most important interviews, depression. It costs South Africa more than 232 billion rand. Let's translate that, 5.7% of the country's entire GDP due to lost productivity, either due to absence from work or attending work whilst unwell. These findings by the IDEA study came up, they came out on the 10th of October, which of course is today.